Welcome back to the Motivated Mind Zone. Glad to have you here. Okay, today we are jumping straight into the deep end, really. We're tackling a topic that is just so fiercely debated, marijuana.
Oh, yeah. It's incredibly charged.
Mentioning it online, it feels like throwing a match into a gas tank sometimes.
It really does. And you find yourself stuck, right? Mention potential benefits, and suddenly you're like reckless.
Right. Or point out the harms, and you're prohibitionist.
Exactly. People feel misinterpreted because the actual science often gets completely sidelined in the heat of it all.
Totally. So our mission today is, well, to give you a shortcut through all that noise. We're trying to set aside the emotions, the politics, the usual battles.
And cloak the whole discussion in the power of data, verified scientific data.
Our core approach is benchmarking. That's the key here.
Right. We're analyzing the evidence, harms, potential benefits from marijuana, and then stacking those results directly against two things society already decided are okay, legally speaking: alcohol and tobacco.
So this deep dive, it's designed to really arm you with the data. Effects, lung function, mortality. By the end, hopefully, you won't be arguing sentiment. You'll have the facts. You'll understand where the science actually lands on this.
Okay, so let's start with the basics, the mechanics. How does it work?
Right. It's a drug. It affects the brain. The main active ingredient is THC, tetrahydrocannabinol.
Yeah, THC. And what happens isn't magic, it's just biochemistry.
Mhm.
THC basically fits into specific protein receptors in the brain, like a key in a lock. The cannabinoid receptors.
And that triggers a whole cascade of results.
Exactly. And that cascade leads to, well, predictable effects, both physiological and cognitive.
Okay.
So immediate effects,
Mhm.
usually a mild sedative feeling, maybe lower inhibitions.
Physically.
Physically, you often see pulse rate go up, blood pressure might drop a bit,
Yeah.
and yeah, the famous increase in appetite.
The munchies, right?
Right.
I think most people know about those effects, but the cognitive stuff, the motor impairment, that's where the real safety concerns often come in, especially for like public use.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the data backs that up. There's significant interference with short-term memory,
Hmm?
plus a measurable drop in reaction time and, some physical unsteadiness.
Okay, so that leads us naturally to the arguments against it, the reasons for prohibition.
Yeah, we have to acknowledge the potential harms the sources detail.
For instance, addiction. The science says no evidence. It causes physical dependency, like, say, heroin, but psychological addiction.
That can happen, yeah. For a subset of regular users, it can definitely be psychologically addictive.
And then the physical risks from smoking it, right?
Primarily smoking, yes. The argument is that the smoke itself might be carcinogenic, could lead to lung cancer, respiratory issues.
There's also some research suggesting heavy use might affect the immune system.
That's been looked at, yes. And maybe the most serious claim you hear is the potential link to mental health.
Specifically, psychosis.
Right. That using it might increase the chance of developing a psychotic illness, particularly in people who might already be susceptible.
Okay, so, stepping back. Nobody should think marijuana is completely harmless. It's a drug. Drugs have effects.
Definitely not harmless. But here's the core question we're trying to get at. Does the harm we know about, does it so overwhelmingly outweigh any benefits? And there's growing evidence for medical uses, pain control, quality of life.
Right.
Does the harm outweigh that enough to justify making it completely illegal, especially compared to other things?
Which brings us to the benchmark. We need that context. Alcohol and tobacco. We regulate them. We don't ban them outright. So they're our measuring stick for acceptable risk.
Let's see how harmful society has basically said is okay.
Okay. Tobacco first.
Lung function.
Yeah, let's start there. We looked at a big study, long-term, published in JAMA.
Journal of the American Medical Association. Very reputable.
Extremely. They followed over 5,000 men and women for more than 20 years, looking specifically at lung health.
And for tobacco users, what was the result?
Well, no big surprise here. Tobacco use showed significant negative effects on lung function.
Degrades the lungs over time. Exactly. Decades of data confirm it. The damage is clear, it's systemic.
Okay, so that's one data point for our benchmark. Now, alcohol. The societal costs here, the numbers are kind of wild.
They really are. We pulled from a CDC report on binge drinking.
And the scale of it is just huge.
What's striking is just how common it is. The CDC defines binge drinking as 4 or more drinks for women, 5 or more for men in one go.
Okay.
By that definition, more than 1 in 6 U.S. adults is a binge drinker.
Wow, that's not some fringe group. That's mainstream.
Totally mainstream. And it's not occasional for many.
How often?
The study found binge drinkers do it, on average, more than 4 times a month.
Then they're having how many drinks?
About 8 drinks, on average, each time they binge.
8 drinks, okay.
And the demographics are interesting, too. You might think it's mostly young adults.
College kids, yeah.
Well, young adults, 18 to 24, they did drink the most per binge, sometimes over 9 drinks. But the elderly, people 65 plus, they actually drank the most often, about 5.5 times a month on average.
So it's really pervasive across age groups.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Now, connect that behavior to the consequences.
This is where it gets really sobering, pardon the pun.
Right. Excessive alcohol use accounted for, wait for it, an estimated 88,000 deaths every year during the study period.
88,000 deaths annually. That's
Yeah.
a massive mortality cost for a legal substance.
Huge. But then there's the economic cost. That really puts the societal acceptance into perspective.
Okay, what was the number?
The estimated economic damage from excessive alcohol use, over $223 billion.
Delium with a B.
Billion with a B.
Yeah.
In just 1 year, 2006.
Hold on, let's just sit with that. $223 billion, $250 billion, basically. That's lost productivity, healthcare, crime, all linked to alcohol.
All documented costs.
And that's the level of damage, the mortality rate, the economic drag that we as a society have decided is acceptable to manage through regulation. That's the benchmark marijuana needs to clear.
Precisely. That is the incredibly high bar of acceptable harm we've already set. So now let's pivot back to marijuana and see how it stacks up against that benchmark, starting with the lungs again.
Okay, back to that big JAMA study, the one that clearly showed tobacco damages lungs. What did it find for marijuana users?
This is where things get really interesting, maybe paradoxical. The JAMA researchers reported that marijuana use, quote, had none of those significant negative lung effects they saw with tobacco.
None, even with heavy users.
They specifically said they couldn't even show that very high use was bad for lung function over the 20 years they studied it.
That just feels wrong, doesn't it? Inhaling smoke, how can that not be bad?
It's a great question. And it's a critical distinction. They're not saying it's good for you.
Yeah, okay.
They're just saying that within their large, long-term study, they couldn't find the kind of damage that was so obvious with tobacco. Their conclusion, and I should quote this directly, occasional marijuana use may not be associated with adverse consequences on pulmonary function.
So a profound difference compared to tobacco in that major study.
A profound difference, yes.
Okay, let's move to the ultimate harm metric. Mortality. People dying. Alcohol causes 88,000 deaths a year. What about marijuana?
Right. We looked at 2 major long-term cohort studies here. The first was from 1990. It followed 45,000 Swedes for 15 years. After controlling for other factors critically important, they found no increase in overall mortality for marijuana users.
Okay, controlling for other factors, just so everyone's clear. That means they accounted for things like whether they also smoked tobacco or had other health issues, right? Not just did they use marijuana.
Exactly right. They isolate the variable as much as possible, and even then, no link to increased mortality.
What about the second study?
That was from 1997. Bigger group, 65,000 Americans aged 15 to 49. And again, the findings were pretty stark. Quote, no effect at all on mortality in women. And for men, quote, no effect on non-AIDS mortality either.
So let's just lay this out. Tobacco clearly damages lungs, causes lots of deaths, but it's legal. Alcohol causes 88,000 deaths a year, costs society nearly $250 billion annual, also legal.
Correct.
Marijuana. Long-term studies show no detectable impact on lung function like tobacco does, no overall impact found on mortality.
And yet, Almost always illegal.
The data just doesn't seem to line up with the policy when you make that direct comparison based on risk.
It really presents a scientific paradox when viewed through the lens of currently legal substances.
And that is the crucial takeaway here. This data isn't an argument for, selling joints at the corner store next to the
Not
cow.
at all. That's not the point.
The point is, the data argues that to keep something illegal, especially when similar or arguably more harmful things are legal, there needs to be a really compelling science-based reason, a good reason that outweighs the risks of the legal options.
And that brings up the whole regulatory question, right? If you move away from total prohibition.
Then the rules we already have for alcohol and tobacco should logically apply.
Absolutely. We don't let kids buy cigarettes or beer. Same sensible rules should apply to marijuana. Age restrictions are essential.
And maybe most critically, driving. We don't let people drive drunk because it's dangerous.
Then, undeniably. And the data is clear here, too. Marijuana also impairs driving.
We need to apply the same standard.
We absolutely must. There was a big meta-analysis published in the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, back in 2011. It confirmed marijuana does, quote, impair drivers significantly.
So the acute harm while operating machinery, that's real. That needs strict regulation.
Severe regulation, just like alcohol impairment.
Okay, so let's do a final assessment based on the data we've covered. It becomes really, really difficult to justify why the freedom we enjoy covers alcohol and tobacco, despite their massive, documented systemic risks.
Yeah.
Yet that same freedom doesn't extend to marijuana, where the specific scientific evidence against it, especially on long-term lung health and mortality, looks remarkably thin in comparison.
So, to wrap it up for you listening, the key thing is separating harm from illegality. The scientific data we have strongly suggests the systemic harms of our common legal substances, the deaths and economic costs from alcohol, the lung damage from tobacco, they far outweigh the documented systemic long-term harm from marijuana regarding lungs and mortality.
That comparison, that's the core knowledge we hope you take away from this. It should really make you think about how public policy, like strict DUI enforcement, age limits, how those are often better tools for managing risk than just saying, no, it's banned, especially when you look at the benchmarks we've already set.
And given that finding, the confirmed impairment while driving, that seems like where the focus needs to shift.
Right.
The precedent is there with alcohol. So the critical public discussion moving forward, it probably shouldn't be whether marijuana should exist or be legal. It should be about how we effectively enforce laws around impaired driving, the technology, the legal framework, and maintain strict age controls. That's where the real risk management discussion should be happening now, based on the data.